Hi everyone, it's the end of the year, so I thought we can sit down and talk about what happened this year, both good and bad, and also talk about reading and writing that I did. So I want to start with the life stuff just because it's most important, I believe. And I'm going to start with the bad thing that happened to us very recently, exactly 9 days ago. And that was that I had to put one of my cats to sleep. My cat was 22 years old. She came to my house when I was just 14 years old, and now I'm 36 years old. So this cat has been with me for most of my life. Even though we separated, I went from my hometown, I went to Moscow to study. So I was in college for a while and then moved to America, and she stayed with my mom for a little bit, but then my mom passed, and so eventually she made her way here to us. And she's been with us since then, and that was since 2019. So for the past 5 years, she lived here. She was old, and obviously, I do understand that when pets get old, they die, but still, I always thought, because I lost a cat in the past who was very young, and I thought back then, because it was devastating, and I thought that if a pet is older, it's easier because you know that they lived a long life. And maybe in a way it is. When you look at this rationally, it is easier to accept the death of someone who lived not just a good life, but an extraordinarily long life. And it is easier than, accepting the death of a 3-year-old, but it's still very painful to part with them. And it's extremely painful to be the one who's making this decision about when to end their life, basically. So that was very difficult. And obviously, it completely threw my December off. And when I was in the midst of it, I have to say, I felt like all my aspirations in life, all my creative endeavors, and all of this just really seem meaningless when you're in the face of death, when you're making this decision and parting with somebody forever. Writing books and painting and dancing and expressing yourself creatively really feels like nothing. Like it doesn't matter at all. So even though it affected my writing schedule and everything, it didn't matter a bit. And so I do miss her. I grieve still, and I grieved before I even made this decision because I knew that it was coming to that point. And I did my best to provide her with a very gentle passing, which it was. And honestly, I think not all humans even get the privilege of leaving this world as peacefully as she did. But it's sad because, I loved this little girl. I loved her spirit. I loved how feisty she was, how she came into our life and basically demanded to be taken in, and she stayed with us and she made everybody fall in love with her, and everybody's always saying how beautiful she is. So I'm going to show some pictures here so you guys can see too. So that's the biggest loss this year, which puts everything into perspective and makes me grateful for having the other animals and obviously the people in my life, and that it's not yet time for us to part. So that's the important part. And it was just a reminder by the end of the year, by Christmas time, for me, what is really important in life. And it's not YouTube, and it's not writing, and it's just the preciousness of life itself. If we talk about other big things, positive things that happened, the biggest one is probably the fact that we signed a contract on our house. This is going to be the first house we will ever own, and we're very excited for that. The construction has begun, and so sometimes I stop by the construction site and I see the house rise from nothing into something. And this is very exciting. I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully I'll be in the new house by summer. We'll see. And another one big life update is that my husband had his birthday recently, and I was able to give him the gift that I was planning for 2 years now. This was an idea that I had a couple of years ago when I found out one of his dreams, and this year I was able to gift it to him. And so that is something very exciting that I was looking forward to very much, and I'm glad I was able to do it for him. So in terms of family, I'm just happy and grateful that I have my family. I have my son, I have my husband, and it just means everything, you know. My two other cats, you know, right now I'm sitting in the room that used to be my Sanya's room, the cat who's passed, but now it's nobody's room. We're not going to use it anymore because we're going to be moving. So for now, it's kind of like a quiet room for thinking, for remembering her, for thinking about the things that are important in life. And I love it when my other two cats come here and share it with me and spend some time here. And I feel like in this way, we kind of honoring her memory in a way. And so all of these big life things that happened this year really just made me realize like that is what's important. Life is important. Being with your loved ones, making your loved ones happy, both animals and humans, that's the important stuff. Now let's talk about writing. And you can say my New Year's resolution for this year was to finish my book. And I did not do that. I did not finish my book. It's now a couple of days still. It's New Year, and it's okay. I did, however, solve the curse of chapter 7, as I called it, because in all my previous projects, I would get to the beginning of the middle and would get stuck there, not knowing what to write about, how to put it all together, how to generate enough conflict, enough substance for the middle, and how to tie it all together and end it. But I feel like this year I've moved way past that. I have, out of 22 chapters I've planned so far, I have 12 completely finished, as well as chapter 22, which is the last chapter. I have it finished as well. This was very satisfying to do, and it's my guiding star to the end of my book now that I have the ending put in words. And I also have several chapters in between partially filled. I have a little bit of chapter 13. I have a little bit of chapter 19. I have a little bit of chapter 20 and maybe 21. So I have a little bit here and there, but going forward, I'm just moving on. I have about 42,000 words complete, and the end word count should be probably around 70,000. And I'm looking forward to keeping working on it next year. Now let's get into the reading I've done this year. So for this year, my main goal was to read more fiction, because recently I've been leaning towards nonfiction much more. And so I just wanted to get back into the habit of reading fiction since I'm writing fiction, and I feel like it's required to read as a writer. So it's very fitting because it's 2024 that's ending, and I read 24 books this year, which is pretty good. 2 books a month, you know, it's good enough for me. And I read 11 nonfiction books and 13 fiction books. I'm also in the process of reading other books, but I'm going to count them as 2025 because that's probably when I'm going to finish them. And so let me walk you through the main types of things. Well, first of all, I want to say that I created 5 categories, my top 5 books of the year. I have a category called Obsession, another one called Instant Classics, one that's called Take Me to a Different Era, another one that's called Make Me Root for a Villain, and the 5th one is called We Are Stars. So I'm going to talk about these books, but also other ones if I think of any other ones I read this year that are kind of similar or I liked very much as well, but maybe they didn't make it into these top 5 categories. For the obsession category, obviously it's the Akatar series. I was very surprised. I did not expect to get into this series as much as I did. I read the first 4 books so far. So I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, and A Court of Frost and Starlight. I have not read The Silver Flames yet, and I don't know if I want to based on the, the things I know about this book, but I cannot say I love the whole series a lot, but I definitely love book number 2 a lot because I've reread it multiple times and it's become my comfort book and I've become kind of obsessed with it. I do like the discussions on the topic of this series in general and on the characters, and I like it enough that this was one of my Christmas gifts from one of my sisters. So that is definitely an obsession category because I've delved into this world more than into any other book world this year. So the next category is instant classics. And that one for me became The Sympathizer. So The Sympathizer tells the story of a double agent, kind of like a mole or a spy type of a person during the Vietnam War. I do not know much about Vietnam War. You know, if I grew up in America, I'd probably know more about it. But I do know it was an important war in American history. And so this tells a story about a person who's technically, so when the Vietnam was divided between the communist and the capitalist worlds, this person is believed to be a communist spy, but he's actually a capitalist spy, so he's a double agent. Very interesting. It reminded me of Crime and Punishment in a way because there's a lot of reflection on human nature and on good and bad, and the good and the evil, and what constitutes what, and why people do what they do, and what's truly important when it comes to matters of life and death and stuff. So that was a very interesting read, very stimulating, and the language is beautiful, the style is beautiful. Not an easy read. A lot of people don't enjoy it, but I enjoyed it. I liked it. I think it's an instant classic. The next category is Take Me to a Different Era, and for that I picked The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I did enjoy this book very much. It has some fantasy, it has some history, so it's like a historical fantasy fiction, and I enjoyed it very much. I liked the characters, I liked the little romance that it had, and in general I found it to be a very rich, very interesting world that comes from the history of Spain and the history of the Inquisition. So the book that made me root for a villain was the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is the prequel to the Hunger Games series. Everybody knows President Snow. Everybody knows who he is, what he's like. And yet, in this book, you see the beginning of the end and you still root for him. You still hope for him to make the right decisions, even though objectively you know he will not make them. But you want him to make them, and you get a little bit of a glimpse into this soul, and you, as the novel progresses, see the soul disintegrate and turn into something corrupt. And it was a fascinating journey. I enjoyed it. I don't think I often read anti-hero stories, but this was definitely an anti-hero story. It was very interesting. Last category is We Are Stars. What I mean by that is that we all come from that and we will all turn into that, right? Stardust eventually. And this is the type of a book that gives me some connection to the world, gives me maybe a reminder, a renewed understanding of my place in the world, of how we all are just a tiny bit of something big and diverse. Basically, the fact that we are all a part of the universe. And so for this category, I picked the book called The Hidden Life of Trees. That is a nonfiction book that talks about trees and how they communicate to each other, which they do, by the way. They don't just grow silently and separately, they actually are able to communicate to each other using different methods. And it's an interesting book. So depending on your outlook in life, if you're strictly a pragmatic kind of scientific person, you might question some of the premises of this book because the way the author, I think his name is Peter Wohlleben, he humanizes the trees a lot. He basically explains the processes that actually happen in a very humanistic language, anthropomorphizes trees to the point that they seem like human beings. And some people might not be fans of this approach, but I like that. I feel like there's a deeper connection to the subject because not all humans can really relate to an inanimate object or what they think are inanimate objects. So I enjoyed it, and I love trees in general. I just love nature and the natural processes. And this book gave me some ideas that I'm planning to apply in my fiction book. So I enjoyed it very much. Some other books, fiction books I read this year there were a couple of detectives which I actually read for library book club. One was called The Kind Worth Killing. It was pretty interesting actually. It gives a glimpse into a mind of a sociopath basically, and it's an interesting mystery. And a couple of unexpected elements there for sure, which will take you by surprise. I also read The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. This one, I don't know. I understand. I understand that it's well written. I understand that Anthony Horowitz is a good mystery writer, but he's good to the point that I feel too stupid when I read the book, right? So when I read a mystery book, I like to be able to piece some of the things together. And in this book, it's written in a way that there's so many suspects and so much information, and the clues are really buried deep, so you most likely won't be able to tell until the very end who the murderer was, or very, very close to the end. And I think I don't quite appreciate not being able to predict anything. I don't know if it's on me because maybe I'm not reading enough mystery books, or if it's truly the way this book is. But I enjoyed The Kind Worth Killing more because it was more of a psychological thriller as opposed to a classic detective. So maybe I'm just not a classic detective person. I did participate in a murder mystery once. It was very fun. I got killed. I got a character role very unexpectedly for me because I had no idea what a murder mystery was, and that you can actually participate in it, and that the actors who are playing roles are just looking for some people who are a little more enthusiastic to give them roles. And so I ended up playing a role and being killed, being poisoned, I believe, in front of everybody. And it was very fun. So I do like the murder mysteries, but I do like the game Clue, for example. I like logical puzzles and stuff. But I maybe don't enjoy when they're too difficult and I cannot solve them. I don't know. I guess I like a good mystery, but a good but solvable mystery, I'd say. Another book I read, so the readers of Broken Wheel recommend that one. I didn't quite like. I felt like it was very slow. I think I'm not a big fan of like cozy romance or like this small town, nothing really happens, slow life type of books, even though they are cozy, but I guess I'm a little too impatient for that type of a story, not sure. And then I read The Glass Witch by Lindsay Puckett just because I found Lindsay as an author tube this year, and I started watching her, and obviously she talked about writing Glass Witch a lot and then publishing Glass Witch, and I was curious and I really enjoyed it. It was a very easy and fun read, and it's amazing to be reading stories that you've heard being created or commented on in the process of creation. There's something about it. Then I also read this graphic novel, I believe. Was it a graphic novel? I think so. It was called Summer Vamp. And I'm in my book, there's a summer camp. And also with like people who have abilities. So even though it's not the right age category, I thought it would be fun to read, and it was an interesting read. And then, yes, all the Akatara books. And then one more book that I read this year was Trash by Andy Mulligan, which is a young adult realistic fiction based on one of the countries in Latin America where there's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of trash. And at some point, like those dump sites, that there was a tragedy. I'm trying to remember. I'm spacing out on the name of the country. Not sure which country it was, but they had a big accident on a trash site, on a dump site, where a lot of people who are, trash diving to get something valuable, they died because like those mountains of trash collapsed. And so this was what inspired this book. And this book is written in that same voice that I talked about in my video about my favorite books, like in the same YA type of voice, which is very distinct, very candid, very, down to earth. So I enjoyed it very much, and it was a fascinating read, an easy read, but also a read that makes you think and feel things. So I enjoyed that. And then when it comes to nonfiction, I'm just gonna quickly go through the categories. So I read biology, history, a couple of books on history, nature, productivity, and psychology. So out of the biology was on the gene. I read most of that book because I was just curious. The psychology book I read was Your Brain on Art, which talked about how arts transform us. And then for history, I read the library book. It was a bit kind of closer to the beginning, where she was talking about how right before opening, the library is like a stage production because everybody has a role and everybody's moving in a certain way to make sure the things are done by the time patrons come through the front door. And I've done theater as a child and I work at a library. And so I really like this analogy because it's true. You do move in a certain way because every morning we all have our tasks we have to accomplish. And so it's very coordinated, like a coordinated dance. So I like this metaphor a lot. And in general, it was an interesting book. It was about a great fire when somebody set the library on fire. So it covers that historical event. And then another historical book I read was They Called Us Enemy, about Japanese internment camps, which is also a part of American history that I'm not particularly familiar with, but now I am. I read this book, it was very interesting. And then the nature one was the trees. And then when it comes to productivity, I always read a lot of books on productivity. I actually listen to them because I'm trying to be productive. Listen to books and, I don't know, do chores or whatever at the same time. So I read The Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, which has a lot of the ideas that I believe in, but that I find difficult to put into practice just because of my own personal, I guess, tendencies or the upbringing that made me live my life in a certain way. But I agree with a lot of ideas in his book, like stuff like taking mistakes and any discouragement as a sign to improve or to change something in your approach and try again. So that is something that I logically understand I need to do, but I often struggle with. And that's why reading books like this encourages me to push through my procrastination, my perfectionism, things like that. And then I read Badass Habits by Jen Sincero, The Sleep Fix, because I've been struggling a lot with my sleep lately. I wake up often in the middle of the night and I cannot go back to sleep for an hour or two. Then Your Best Year Ever. Then around the time the Olympics were happening, I was reading No Limits by Michael Phelps, which obviously very inspiring to listen to people like that who've accomplished so much. And then I read Ali Abdal's Feel Good Productivity after I watched some of his YouTube videos. I mean, if a person quotes Derek Shepherd from the Grey's Anatomy, I've got to listen to them, you know. And then, yeah, and that was it for the nonfiction books. So I like this year in books. I already have plans for the next year. I have a bunch of books that I'm either reading or getting ready to check out. I've tapped my Hoopla checkouts for December, so now I'm waiting till January comes so I can check out a couple more books that I'm excited about. Right now, I'm reading Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. I listened to Liane's interview, an hour-long interview with her about this book and in general about writing and stuff. And the premise, I haven't heard about this book before, so I just wanted to listen to Liane because I love her writing style. I loved Big Little Lies, and I feel like she's writing in a way that's very true to life. But I've never heard about this book, but during the interview, when she shared the premise, I thought, oh my God, this sounds fascinating. Basically, the premise is that there's a flight that's been delayed, everybody's kind of nervous, and there's like your regular flight, there will be people from all walks of life, different ages, different situations. Somebody's on a honeymoon trip, somebody's a parent with crying kids, somebody's an older couple, and this and that. So in the middle of the flight, when they finally are in flight, a woman stands up and she starts walking through the cabin and pointing at each person and telling them at what age they will die and how they will die, or what's the reason of death is going to be. And even that one is already very nerve-wracking and heartbreaking at times, because we are looking at these predictions from the point of view of the people who are getting them. And so we get to know a couple of passengers and we know their circumstances, and to hear their predictions is really hurtful at times. But it's just the beginning of the book, it's just the premise. So I guess the main story is how these people are gonna continue living their lives with this information in mind. And I just thought about it, like, for example, how really, because some people say, well, I don't believe in that, or, I believe in free choice or free will, and that I can change my fate. But at the same time, you can crunch it in a way that it really cannot be changed. Like, for example, if you've had a prediction that maybe your child will die by drowning, then okay, you might try to get them away from all the bodies of water. You can try to never get them anywhere near water, like to the lake or whatever, or always supervise them in bath, right? Never move into a house with a pool, all sorts of things. But that might produce a desire in said child to go explore water on their own when they're unsupervised at some point, because they've been protected from it at all times. So it's really interesting to think about how this could really be a situation where you cannot change your fate even if you're warned about it, right? And obviously, if you've been warned that you will die from some typical disease at age 95, well, that's amazing, good for you, because everybody would love to live till 95, probably, as long as it's not dementia or something like that. But what if it's much earlier than that? What if you haven't lived your life yet? I think that's the main existential fear that book talks about, that you're not done yet. You haven't done what you wanted yet. You haven't loved, you haven't parented yet enough, right? Your children are still little. Like, these are the things that are really scary. And they happen, right? They happen on roads and everywhere all the time. So, it's a difficult subject, but it's a very interesting book premise. So I'm enjoying that. I'm about 100 pages in, and there's like 800 more pages in my ebook. So here's that. So now let's talk about next year and what I'm looking forward to. First, I want to say what I'm not looking forward to. One of my good friends is moving away to a different state, and I'm not looking forward to that. But I'm hoping that we will continue keeping in touch and talking about writing, because that was one of the topics that connected us, but also about other things. She has started a family, and so it's going to be exciting to see the pictures as the baby grows and everything. So it's sad, but that's just the reality of life in America, which is new for me, because in Russia, basically, a lot of people just stay their whole lives where they were born. Some of them will move away, but usually, like, everybody moves to the same two big cities, right? So you know a lot of people in every city that you live in, and going back to hometown is usually not a problem. So people just don't move around as much. And that includes everybody, your friends, your colleagues, everybody. And so here, this reality that people might come into your area, become your friends, and then leave in a year or two. It's difficult, because I like to keep the people that I love. I don't like to part with them, but that's just life. So here we go. Mm, And then in terms of, obviously, I'm looking forward to moving in the new house. I'm looking forward to just life, life stuff. But I'm also looking forward to keeping working on my book and to the day when I will be able to post a video saying I finished writing my book. Like that will be exciting. And then a couple more things. I'm gonna continue working with my writers group. That is I'm excited about. We might even, so for now we do it as like a library thing, but I think depending on the circumstances, we might move it out of the library and have it just as a private, like personal thing. Because the way it's been going on, I have those couple of people who we've been working with together on everybody's novels for a while. So now we're deep into our novels and we know what's going on and what the beginning of the novel was like. So getting new people into the group is weird because they most of the time cannot catch up as easily. There's now, I don't know, 10 chapters or something that's we've gone through. And so it feels like we're a little more now critique partners as opposed to just a writers group. So I don't know, we might do something where we will meet at the library, like maybe with some other works of ours, and meet separately as a private like critique partners situation. So I don't know about that, but I'm grateful to have these people in my life, and I enjoy their support and supporting them, and that is something that I'd like to continue having. And then also we have a bunch of like really cool writers programs at the library, so a lot of speakers come over and talk to us about different things writing. So that is also exciting. I'm planning to visit all of these programs and learn as much as I can. And another thing I want to do more in the new year is exercise more. My health is not amazing currently, and I know I need to get more exercise and stuff into my routine. I was doing very well before December happened, like the second half of December, and that really threw me off. But even actually in the process of like grieving and stuff, there was a day when I got on a bike, because I was like, I need my body to keep functioning, and I couldn't eat, and I was feeling nauseous and I was feeling so weak and just overcome with grief that even though I was entirely not in the mood, I still got and started exercises, because I was like, okay, I need to help. I need to help my body, help my mind. And so I think that's like a trap I fall into when I really try to focus on something like studying or writing, that I completely neglect my body and I just focus on the intellectual stuff. But the fact is that I'm not 20 anymore, and whatever neglect I'm doing, it shows. It shows in how I feel, in my energy levels, in my actual health, with some serious things that are beginning to come up. So I really want to focus more on my health and focus it in a way that doesn't drain me entirely, because last time I was in a health kick, I made it my whole life. So my whole day would be arranged around that. And I cannot do that if I also want to write my books. I need to find a way to integrate sport and good diet into a life that also has creativity in it. So I'll be working on that. But as I said, those things that happened put things into perspective and really reminded me what's important. And so even though writing is very important for me, it's not as important as more major life things. And so I'll keep that in mind on days like that, like when I have to admit I didn't meet my goals. There were other things and they were important. So here's my 2024 in review. How was your year? What did you accomplish? What did you work on? Did anything significant happen to you that you would like to share? Let me know. And also, what are you looking forward to in 2025? I'll see you next year. Bye.